Hello, new friends and old. It's so nice to see everybody today. Even as we fight to save democracy, we need to pay for it. Yeah. And with April 15th right around the corner, today seems like the perfect time to make those plans. There's a great book that I have enjoyed and recommend. Taxes are a woman's issue. And I would like to paraphrase part of that. Taxes determine the quality of our lives, the safety of the water we drink, the survival of our wetlands, the quality of the public schools, and our neighbors' access to medical care and healthy food. Taxes even fund our voting machines. But it turns out that our current tax policy disadvantages some while benefiting others. We are so delighted to welcome Ralph Martire to explain all of this for us and explore with us whether the Illinois tax system provides adequate revenue for the government to function at the level we need it to. Ralph Martire is the executive director of the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, a nonpartisan think tank. He is also the Rubloff Professor of Public Policy at Roosevelt University. He's helped develop and pass legislation for new school funding mechanism to promote more equal educational opportunities for all Illinois children, for a refundable tax, state earned income tax credit to make the state's tax system more progressive, and for corporate accountability and transparency rules, among many other fiscal policy successes. He is a regular columnist, and he is a very favorite presenter at the League of Women Voters issues briefings. Yes. So, yes. And following Ralph's presentation, we will welcome warmly Nadeen Israel, who is currently the Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. She will put a human face on the charts and numbers and give us a call to action. Nadeen has worked to advance health policy with other advocates across the state for decades. Not that she's any older than we are, okay? She's including policy development and implementation for maternal mortality, mental health and substance abuse, housing, and state budget and tax policy. So thank you so much to both of you for joining us this morning. We will have time for questions at the conclusion of Nadeen's remarks. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. How are you? So I'm Ralph Martire, Executive Director of the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. I'm assuming you all came here today. You got up this morning and said, I want to talk about taxes, right? Show of hands. You are all great Americans, and whoever's hand didn't go up, have some more coffee because I'm going to talk about taxes. All right. So let's see. You got to start with where we are in Illinois, and where we are is where we typically are. If you look at this breaks down the FY 2026 budget, and we're going to spend $55 billion this year, but $15.8 billion of that was spent with nobody voting on anything, right? Those are hard costs the state has to pay by contract or by law. So it's things like our bond indebtedness, it's group health insurance. There are statutory transfers that go out of the general fund to fund local governments, et cetera, right by law, come in, go out. And there's the pension contribution. So boom, that leaves about $40 billion in gross appropriations for services. State of Illinois has always spent somewhere between 93 and 96% of all its general fund service expenditures on four things: education, health, social services, and public safety. And so it is again in this year. But even though they appropriated $40 billion, they're not going to spend that full $40 billion. Right? There's always a line in the budget called unspent appropriations. That means they don't have the money to spend what they appropriated, and sometime during the year they're going to cut something. So even if you get a line in the budget, you may not get your full funding. That's just the reality of how the beast works. We've had a hard time in Illinois in balancing our budget. This shows you whether or not over time, this is from 2000, the state had a balanced budget. The yellow line is GAAP, that's the better basis. The red line is budgetary. A budgetary basis, you can play a lot of games. You don't have to deal with, let's say, carry forward indebtedness from the prior year that you got to pay the next year. You could ignore that and saying you're balanced, et cetera. So really the gap line is the real line that shows you whether or not the state was actually able to balance its budget. And it really never did from 2000 forward until Pritzker got in office. I mean, we are in the halcyon days of the state budget. Now, how did that happen? Well, number one, the feds helped. We got $6.4 billion in COVID relief funding from fiscal year 2020 through 2025. That helped. We also got a record revenue growth in the last few years from 2020 to 2026 of $16.6 billion. Some of that is because we increased taxes. About $2.8 billion of that is recurring taxes every year. But the rest of it was due to some very unique economic factors. And the biggest unique economic factors was the record profit taking businesses did post-pandemic. So when the pandemic ended and we could all leave our houses again, people went nuts buying stuff. That drove up inflation, right? And when inflation goes up, you know what the corporate world says? People don't know what's driving up this inflation. I'm going to price gouge. I'm going to price gouge because I can, and I can increase my profits. Now, typically, going back to the end of World War II until this period of time, corporate price gouging only accounted for about 10% of that inflationary pressure. Wages were about 63%, and supply chain issues were the rest. In this last sequence, corporate profits were about 22% of the pressure, more than double. They went nuts. So that drove up revenue sources at both the state and local levels and really helped our general fund. And Pritzker, when he got all this money, to his credit, I've never been able to say this before, the governor was mostly responsible in how he handled the largesse. Right? I mean, this is Illinois. That doesn't happen all the time, but it did happen under Pritzker. So he actually took that money and used a lot of it to repay debt, old bills, and cut our interest costs. So I've included in the PowerPoint, I'm not going to go through them here, but so you have in the information, some of the new revenues that were passed in FY22, FY25, FY26. So you see every year we were passing new revenue under Pritzker, getting rid of a tax break here, adding a little extra fee here, et cetera, that was generating some recurring revenue. Then we got the 2027 proposal. Looks very similar to 2026. We have about 16 billion in hard costs. We're going to spend about 56 billion overall. We're going to spend 94.7% of our service expenditures on education, health, social services, and public safety. So we're doing the things we typically do. Net spending will be about 39.7 billion. We do have new revenue to support that, however. It's about 640, almost 650 billion in new revenue proposed. So if this proposed new revenue doesn't come in, increasing state casino taxes, changing the net operating loss deduction, social media platform fee for the first time ever, and this one's actually annoying, cutting the local government distributive fund that the state shares with municipalities across Illinois. I don't know if any of you heard of this town, little town called Chicago? So Chicago has some fiscal issues. And every time the state cuts what it typically shares with local governments, it drives up the pressure on what? Property taxes, right? So for Chicago, which is in a very difficult fiscal position, the state has really been taking a lot of money it shouldn't be taking at the state level and diverting revenue that should go to local government. So that one I really don't like. But these are all proposals. If they don't happen, we can't spend what we're currently planning to spend in the proposed budget that Pritzker put on the table. Why is that a problem? As it is, go to the bottom line. The proposed budget will spend 1.7% less than last year on education, health, social services, and public safety. It's a year-to-year cut in real inflation-adjusted terms. Heck, it's a real cut in nominal dollars. So the bottom line is, without that new revenue, almost 650 million, this cut gets worse. And what's being cut? education, health, social services, and public safety. That's why a lot of the rhetoric around budgets is so designed to mislead voters and to reinforce your normative values, right? What do you hear all the time from folks that don't want to deal with taxes? Well, we need across the board cuts. You've heard that, across the board cuts. Anybody heard that? You know why they say that? They don't want to tell you what's on the board. They don't want to say we need to cut education, health, social services, and public safety. Across the board cuts sounds so much better, right? We need to do more with less. What? I was a business lawyer for 25 years before I went into the doing good government stuff. And I did mergers and acquisitions, structured finance, I was an evil corporate attorney and pretty good at it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Proud of that past. I didn't know of a business that did more with less. That pixie dust doesn't exist in the private sector, and it sure doesn't exist in the public sector. You want to do more, you need more. And the problem with our current funding levels is we underfund every one of these core services, and we're cutting them. So why is that going on in Illinois? Well, for generations, we've had a structural deficit. What does that mean? It means starting with a balanced budget, which we do have in fiscal year 2026. You start with a balanced budget. If you adjust going forward your costs for historic rates of inflation and population change, and you assume a normal growing economy every year, that red line shows you our adjusted costs going forward. The only other thing added in there is our debt service. That is what it is. You don't adjust that for anything. That yellow line is our anticipated revenue. Well, there's the problem, folks. We've had a structural imbalance like this in Illinois since at least the 1970s. That's the first time the U of I identified it. So our revenue doesn't grow at a level that's necessary to sustain investing in the same level of services from year to year. So in Illinois, you've got to determine, well, was this caused by lousy tax policy or because you're crazy overspending on services and you need to rein that in? Which do you think it is? Yeah, it's taxes. So let's just give you the spending. I'm going to cut to the bottom line here. So this compares our 2026 enacted budget to FY 2000. That's Republican Governor George Ryan's enacted budget, adjusted for inflation. So if you look at this, FY 2000 is the far left column. That's what we spent on those four core services. FY 2000 adjusted for inflation. So those are equal dollars. So go to the top line, that $4.6 billion that we spent on K-12 education in the year 2000 is the equivalent of spending $10.6 billion in today's money. The next line shows you what the 2026 budget is going to spend on it. And the final two columns is, are we increasing or are we decreasing our expenditure after time in real inflation adjusted terms? You have to adjust for inflation. You can't just use nominal dollars. Well, no, we're cutting spending on most of the core services in real terms. Why? We have a structural deficit. So the state doesn't have enough money every single year to keep doing what it did the year before in real terms. So it's little tiny cuts, death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing over time. Little tiny in most cases, not for higher ed. Look what we did to higher ed. Higher ed is down by 47% almost in real terms. Back in 2003, which was the high point for higher ed funding in the state of Illinois, higher ed funding covered roughly 72% of the cost of average cost of a kid attending a public university in our state. And tuition and fees covered about 28%. It's flipped today because of the state disinvestment. You're wondering why tuition is too high? The growth in tuition costs in Illinois over that period outstripped the national growth by over 50 percentage points. These state investment decisions matter. That's just one of them, but oh my goodness. So bottom line is we're going to spend 14.3% less on education, health, social services, public safety this year, the current year that we're in, than we did last year. And it doesn't get better next year. Because the budget is going to be year-to-year cut, that goes to almost a 16% cut in real terms if the FY 2027 budget as proposed passes, and it needs $649 million to cut by just that much. That's context for you of how a structural deficit over time creates problems. So what did we do in Illinois to mask that structural deficit? Well, we did three things. We cut spending on those services in real terms over time. But, you know, it's a political loser to come home and say, you know what I'm going to do this year? We're going to slash funding on K-12 higher. You know, that's not going to get you reelected. So you don't tell people you're doing that. You say, I'm going to make some across the board cuts and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. At some point, I want a line item in the budget for waste, fraud, and abuse. This is what we're going to do. And we could decide whether or not we're going to cut it on a year-to-year basis. That would be all good. We won't get there in Illinois. I'm assuming we have some waste, fraud, and abuse in Illinois, anything with billions of dollars, but not a lot. Do you know from a head count standpoint, we have the 6th largest population in America. We have the 5th largest economy. State workers per capita, we rank 49th. 49th. We are short about 7,000 workers. So next time you're standing in line forever to get your driver's license renewed, blame taxes. So the first thing they did was cut spending. Second thing they did was say, you know what, let's not fund the pensions. Let's just not put any money in. They did that for decades. And then in 1995, Governor Edgar got together with someone you may have heard of. He's been out of politics for a while, Speaker Madigan. And they got together and they passed something called the pension ramp. And the pension ramp was all designed, was told to us, to clean up this underfunding in the pensions. So you want your pension systems to be considered healthy, depending on the metric you're going to use, anywhere from 80% to 100% funded. That is having 80% to 100% of the assets you need to cover all your liabilities. Back in 1995, when they passed this, we were 52% funded, not so healthy. So they said, we're going to pass a 50-year payment plan through 2045. You're looking at the end of the payment plan there, by the way, to catch up and to get 90% funded by the end of 2045. And they didn't pass a nickel of revenue to fund it. So now you had a structural deficit, which was causing you to underfund your pensions to begin with. You pass a new payment plan, so you create a bigger payment line, and no new revenue. You made your structural deficit worse. You add those little bars together every year. That's the total pension ramp payment every year under the 1995 ramp. I broke it out to 2 bars so you could see the game they played. The blue bar at the bottom, that's the cost of funding pension benefits being earned by current workers. The orange bar, that's the debt plan they passed. Yeah, I'm pretty good at tax policy. I teach a master's course on it at Roosevelt University. I can't design a tax system that grows like that over time. It's just not rational. So this is part of the problem created by the structural deficit. We underfunded pensions, and then we passed an irresponsible backloaded repayment plan to deal with it. The next thing that they did, in addition now cutting spending, not funding pensions, is push the primary obligation to fund K-12 education away from the state and down to local property taxes. So here would be your data. So this US, excuse me, the US average is in that, it's a weird yellow maize color. The US average is in yellow maize, and Illinois is in orange. In Illinois, local property taxes cover 62% of the total cost of funding K-12 education. The national average is only 42%. In Illinois, state tax revenue covers 27% of the cost of K-12 education. National average is 45%. And then federal government covers the rest. So we are way out of whack. We're always in the bottom 2 or 3 states in the portion of K-12 funding covered by state-based taxes, and always in the top 1 or 2 for the portion of property taxes used to fund K-12 education. The only way to fix that, folks, you want to get off our over-reliance to property taxes. We do, you know, the funny thing about Illinois tax policy, so many humorous things about Illinois tax policy. Overall, we're a Midland tax state. Every tax and fee charged to fund any unit of state and local government, we rank 24th in the nation, almost dead middle as a percentage of income, right? 6th largest population, 5th, we're not high tax. You isolate out the property tax, we're always top 3 or 4. So we way over rely on the property tax, and that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for education funding, right? Because it ties the quality of public education a kid gets to the property wealth of the community in which the kid lives. Kid lives in a wealthy community, great schools. Kid lives in a middle or low income community, not so much. So we have to get off this addiction. We can't do it unless we eliminate the structural deficit. We can't eliminate the structural deficit without solving the tax problem we have at the state of Illinois. It all comes together. And this is not just a horrible way to fund schools, it's a horrible way to tax people. So this is property tax growth adjusted for inflation from 1990 through 2023, the last year there's full data, versus median income growth. Property taxes have jumped at almost 7 times the rate of growth in income for most people. You just can't do that. Think about seniors on a fixed income. Think about low and moderate income workers whose literally their incomes aren't even keeping up with inflation over time. So over relying on property taxes, it's horrible tax policy and it's horrible education funding policy. And it is the law of the land in the state of Illinois. The reason we want to do a better job of funding education is pretty simple. We passed a law called the evidence-based funding formula a couple of years back in 2017 calendar year, 2018 fiscal year, that ties the amount of money we invest in K-12 education to covering those evidence-based practices that actually enhance student academic performance. And that's academic performance writ large. So yes, of course, it's test scores, but it's graduation rates, it's dropout rates, it's disciplinary rates. It's literally everything you would use to evaluate a well-functioning K-12 system. We now know that based on the evidence, we're about $3.4 billion short of what is needed for every school to have the resources required so every kid in Illinois gets a quality education. And we're falling further behind because of the cuts. This says 3.1 billion. We just changed that number, by the way. We recalculated this last night. It's going to be $3.4 billion shortfall this year. So we're worse than last year. There you go. Nice. And the evidence-based funding formula that we passed has been working to eliminate inequities in our K-12 funding system that have existed for decades. And so real quick, go to that far left-hand column. In 2018, that's the typical per pupil funding gap faced by race, the different ethnic groups in our state of kids who are attending an underfunded school. So your typical white kid was looking at a funding gap of $2,700, Black kid, $3,700, Latino, $3,900. So not only were we disadvantaging low-income populations generally, we were disadvantaging Black and brown populations specifically. We had a structurally racist approach to K-12 funding in Illinois. Now go forward to 2026. Every one of those gaps has gone down, but look how they've narrowed. The money is going the way it should go. It's eliminating historic structural inequities in our school funding system. We just need to fund it. And the sooner we do it, the better. Better for our entire state. So I gave you a lot of the state problems. The governor, if you listen to his budget address this year, blamed the feds for a lot of our fiscal problems. And, you know, they deserve some of the blame. I mean, a lot of it's inherent to the structure of our tax policy, but certainly the feds are piling on. And the main way they're piling on is through the One Big Beautiful Act. You know, calling it that, doesn't it make you like throw up a little in the back of your mouth? It's not so beautiful. The governor's office of management of the budget right now estimates over the next 5 years it's going to cost us $8.4 billion. That's what they're willing to cover. It way underestimates the full cost being imposed on Illinois if we wanted to make up for all the cuts. In fact, I just highlighted one there. In 2 years, the cost of making up for all the Medicaid costs alone will be $4.3 billion annually. All right. So these are the cuts recognized next year by John B. You see that some of them have to do with SNAP and Medicaid. Some of them have to do with lost revenue. See, our tax policy is tied to federal tax policy. So when they cut taxes, we cut taxes unless we decouple, et cetera, et cetera. We have decoupled a little. We've already saved $243 million by decoupling. We have said decouple from all those tax cuts. We don't need them in Illinois. It's not our law. Why are we doing it? But here's what's really happening with OBA, and I had to put a slide or two on this on here so we all understand. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, what are the costs really coming from? We're all from tax cuts and tax cut extensions. In fact, those costs alone are well over $4 trillion over the next decade, right? Then we're making other tax cuts, some of which are temporary. We're increasing defense spending and ICE spending, blah, 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 blah. And then what are we cutting to pay for it under OBA? Medicaid, green technology, student loans, SNAP, other healthcare, natural resources. In fact, what doesn't even make the papers, Medicare, not Medicaid, will be cut by close to over half $1 trillion in the next 10 years to pay for these cuts. Medicare. All right. So that whole OBA thing is based on trickle-down economics, which do they work when we think about it? No. There's never been a peer-reviewed study that shows it. Here's some of the better peer-reviewed studies that say, why are you doing these tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporations? They don't stimulate your economy. Stop doing it. Here's our net impact of OBA on the state budget. Go to the bottom line. On average, over the next 10 years, it's $4.69 billion a year to make up for all the cuts, SNAP, Medicaid, revenue losses, et cetera, for a total cost in 10 years of $46.9 billion. The reason why we're not realizing a lot of them in the upcoming fiscal years, they deferred the big cuts till after the midterm elections for political reasons. So they made the structural deficit worse. The current structural deficits, the dotted lines, the dark lines are the new structural deficit with OBA. Not so good. So how do we fix our problems? There's a couple of different things we could do. Number one, let's refinance that pension debt. This gets us 90% funded like 2045, just like current law. So the red line going across there, that's current law. The dark green bars become the new payments that we're making in. The little dark blue bars, those are pension obligation bonds that are taken out and retire unfunded pension liability debt so that we could front load payments even more. We do this. We don't have to do anything but change the law. We do this, we save $43 billion between now and 2045 and still get the pensions 90% funded. Senator Lightford has put in a bill to do this. Please all support Senator Lightford's bill and push your elected officials to get on board. It's just common sense. We have to do it. Number two, our tax policy is lousy. So what we would do if we lived in a perfect world is we'd have a graduated rate structure for our income tax, right? Like they do at the federal level, where the rates get higher as incomes get higher. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in Illinois. So Illinois has a constitution that requires a flat tax. That's frustrating because it doesn't allow our income tax to respond to how incomes are actually distributed in the modern economy. And it doesn't allow us to build some progressivity into our system. So here's some data on why you want progressivity. Go to the comparison in the right. This is Illinois data. In 1979, the wealthiest 1% in Illinois earned on average $800,000 a year. By 2020, that had jumped to 1.78 million, an increase of 122%. This is in real terms. Everybody else, the bottom 99%, went from 71,000 on average to 76, a 7% increase. You see, you need a graduated rate structure to try to get at that stuff at the top. And, you know, most of the income growth happened to the wealthiest 10%, wealthiest 12. Really, the wealthiest one did crazy. All right. How can we deal with that with a flat rate income tax? And the answer is actually pretty simple. This is a pathway to generating revenue and making the tax system fairer. Under our current 4.95% rate, go to this table, we're generating $25 billion in revenue. If we increased it by 1.5 points to 6.45, we would generate $32 billion. Go down the line, there's the transfers out to the local government fund, the refund fund, all the things we have to do. Our net would be $26 billion versus 20. But now everybody's paying that $26 billion. How do we create some fairness? How about we create a tax credit that's refundable for low and middle income families so that people with $75,000 a year or less in taxable income don't pay this tax increase? Well, that only costs $1.6 billion. We still raise $4.4 billion, and we've shifted tax burden from the bottom and middle to the top. That's living within a flat rate using a refundable tax credit to get there. All right, sales taxes. Illinois sales tax base, way too narrow. We tax very few services. We tax primarily goods. You look at Illinois, 73% of our economy is the sale of services, 17% is the sale of goods. So you can see this the number of services we tax versus other states. We're in the bottom third, bottom quarter, bottom 10% of services taxed. If we just tax the same consumer services as Wisconsin and Iowa, our neighboring states, we would generate $2 billion. We'd eliminate the structural deficit with the income tax increase. And the bottom line is we'd have a tax system that responded to the modern economy. Now, so for those who will say this will hurt the economy, they don't know what they're talking about. We're not going to lose any businesses. We would tax things like haircuts, lawn care, bowling, auto labor, et cetera. Do you see busloads of people coming from Iowa and Wisconsin into Illinois to get their haircut to avoid the taxes there? They do not, do they? Have you seen their haircuts? They should come, shouldn't they? Because they look funny, but they're not coming for tax reasons. So the bottom line is that's just a bunch of malarkey. There's also the Illinois Revenue Alliance, who has a number of progressive revenue alternatives out on the table. They have a billionaire wealth tax. The combined reporting thing, we should do that yesterday on businesses because it generates revenue and it makes all the sense in the world. Number of other states already have it. They've additional decoupling, like I said before, we should decouple from all the federal tax changes and a digital advertising tax that may have some constitutional issues, but we'll have to see how that works out. But the bottom line is there are ways to skin this cat. And if we're going to do it appropriately, we should start with our big revenue sources, our income and sales, and get them to work in the modern economy. Then we should re-amortize that pension debt, still treat our pension responsibility the right way, get those pensions 90% funded, but save $43 billion that we don't have to raise in taxes or cut in spending. So that's the long and short of where we are today and how we could get to a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Please hold while we change slides.
Are we going to take questions?
We'll take questions after the session or at the end of the session.
All right, y'all, good morning. I'm just going to be a few minutes so that we have plenty of time for questions. Don't worry about it. And there are more slides. I will not go through all of them, but the idea is to give you the information. I'm also going to try to play a little video. So we'll see how that goes. Oops. There we go. So again, my name is Nadeen Israel. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at AIDS Foundation Chicago. We are a nonprofit working to end the HIV epidemic in Illinois by 2030. We also have a dual goal of ending homelessness in our city of Chicago, and our state. All of this is possible, to Ralph's points, as long as we have the political will, the money, and a lot of smart people, which we already do. All of these things are possible to happen. I'm also wearing a second hat today. So I'm part of a coalition called Protect Our Care Illinois. This coalition came together, healthcare advocates, human service folks, housing, League of Women Voters, lots of individuals, actually under Trump 1.0 to defend Medicaid and the ACA. And we've stayed together and kind of revamped again under Trump 2.0, unfortunately. This is the video time. Hang on one sec. Sorry, I'm just having a hard time getting to the screen. One sec. I need to be on that screen.
Not on here.
Yeah.
Our new member on my.
Yeah, sorry, I know you showed me, but it was, oh, there it is. How did you do it? There you go. If we can just play it all the back.
Hi, my name is Allison Powell. I'm represented by Mike Bost in District 12 of Illinois, and Medicaid has saved my life on more than one occasion. I got married young, and all three of my children were born in hospitals thanks to Medicaid. When I was 27 years old, I got really sick, and none of the emergency rooms could figure out why. Finally, I got approved again for Medicaid and hospitalized for a week. I ended up needing to have my gallbladder removed. Just to be in the hospital before the surgery cost over $100,000, and that was 15 years ago. I could have never afforded that if I hadn't been hospitalized. I would have died from the infection. During the pandemic, I contracted COVID 3 times, despite getting the 3 vaccinations that were available, again, thanks to Medicaid. Unfortunately, I developed post-COVID syndrome, which is also known as long-haul COVID, and I continue to deal with the side effects to this day. I live in an area where it's already difficult to find doctors, and thanks to Medicaid, I have a wonderful doctor who's been determined to help me, and she's tried countless methods to do so. If I lose access to Medicaid, I will also lose access to that doctor and all the medications and treatments and prescriptions that are keeping me alive and functioning. My mental and physical health literally depends on having Medicaid. I'm 45 years old now and a grandmother. My children and grandmother need me to be around as long as I can. That's why I'm calling on all elected officials, especially, to protect Medicaid and to vote no to any cuts to Medicaid to ensure it's a thriving program for future generations. It's helped and continues to help me and has literally saved my life on more than one occasion. Thank you.
I can't control YouTube.
That the next slide?
Yeah.
Should be good. Just want to make sure this works. Okay.
So thank you so much. Alrighty. So I wanted to share that. Thank you so much. I wanted to share that because human stories and human faces are a lot of the time what sticks, not just with us, but with electeds. And we are working on story collection within Protect Our Care, within my organization at AIDS Foundation Chicago, for Medicaid stories, for Affordable Care Act, healthcare stories, for housing stories, for HIV stories. So my first ask is, please help us spread the word. There's a really simple intake form that is included. I think it was in the handouts. I can also reshare it, and a flyer that can be used. The way we're doing it is we're hooking folks up with a storytelling trainer. So one-on-one session, 2 30-minute sessions is all it takes. And then we have a story like Allison's at the end of it. And we have a video story, we have a written story. And the idea is to utilize these stories for things like this, but also when these folks are interested in advocating with us. So they have participated in sharing their story in press conferences, in town halls, in speaking to the media. And as y'all know, I heard this yesterday actually, so what did they say? They said, numbers numb and stories stick. And that line stuck with me yesterday when I was doing a different, and we need the numbers. So don't get me wrong. We do need the numbers. We absolutely need the numbers. But at the end of the day, our capacity, if it's not our job, like Ralph or the legislators, our capacity to like retain those numbers is very low. What we usually do remember is the story, and we need more stories. So Ralph mentioned a few things that I just want to highlight. One is if you saw the healthcare line, which includes Medicaid for our state, it's been cut since the 2000 number and the 2026 number. It was like just under 30%. So we've already been underfunding as a state healthcare. Now on top of that, add the Ugly Act, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but it's the Ugly Act, which enacted the largest cut to Medicaid. Medicaid and Medicare, these programs were started in 1965. It's the largest cut in the program's history. So our job at this point, because the law has already happened, SNAP was cut, largest cut in SNAP and food stamps. And the way they did that is by adding, one of the ways they did that at the federal level is by adding a work requirement. Really, it's a work reporting requirement. Basically, it adds another layer of paperwork, and that's how people will lose their benefits. And that's how the money gets saved at the federal level. It has nothing to do with work. Most people on Medicaid do work. If they don't work, it's because they're taking care of a young person or somebody who's sick. So an elderly, a parent, a young child who's sick, or if they're living with a disability. So this narrative that you will continue to hear, waste, fraud, and abuse, people should be working, they should earn these benefits, is just false. It is not based in any facts. It is not based in any statistics. No policy, no program is going to be perfect. But these are multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar programs. There's going to be some mistakes that are made. And yes, a little bit of fraud. But that doesn't mean that the majority, the vast majority of the program is working as it's intended. The SNAP cuts, the second thing I want you to keep in mind is the SNAP cuts, the work requirement is in effect now. The Medicaid one is going to be in effect in starting in 27, calendar year 27, but SNAP is in effect now. So what we're going to start seeing is a bigger demand on food pantries, folks who are literally not having enough, more folks who are literally not having enough to feed themselves and feed their families. There are exemptions, I should say, thank you so much. There are exceptions to the SNAP and Medicaid cuts, within the law. So they will not apply to everybody. So it'll be important also in terms of getting the message out is to make sure that folks understand if they are part of the exempt population or not. Because if they are part of the exempt population, they should be exempt. And the state has already said that they're going to do everything that they can to make sure those who are eligible for SNAP and Medicaid stay on. Okay, we did that. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. So this slide is just to say this is both true for SNAP and Medicaid. The other thing that the Ugly Act did is it cut a bunch of immigrant populations essentially out of eligibility. They've always been eligible. So refugees, asylees, victims of human trafficking will no longer qualify. For SNAP, it's a little earlier. It starts earlier this year. And for Medicaid, it starts in the fall. If you're not familiar with the immigration system, I'm an immigrant myself. These all are folks who came in through a documented path. None of these folks are undocumented because guess what? Medicaid has never covered undocumented immigrants at the federal level. We have created programs at the state level, but it's never been a thing at the federal level. So in terms of both SNAP and Medicaid, I'm going to whiz through these now. And I apologize, but we went through this. By the way, the immigrant cuts also apply to ACA, folks who are would have been eligible for Affordable Care Act health insurance. So in terms of the things to do, revenue proposals. So first of all, Ralph mentioned a bunch of revenue proposals. 4 of them are bills that are current bills in our state legislative session. That's one thing that our state legislature can do. Pass those bills, increase revenue, so we can at least mitigate the harm from some of these cuts. Things that y'all can do. So 1, call your representative, email them, and more than once. This is really the time. The state legislative session ends right May 31st. So April and May is when a lot of this stuff actually happens. It's really important, especially on the revenue proposals, that they're hearing from folks because they're not hearing from a lot of folks right now. So that they're not talking about it as much, and they need to. Please help us spread the word about the story collection. Again, it's really, really, really important. And then talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors. If you're a part of other groups that would like presentations like this are a little bit more in depth, happy to do that myself or connect with a colleague that can do that. And with that, we'll take questions. Thank you.
I see we have people lining up already here. I don't know if we have any online questions, but We're going to start on the right-hand side. If we need the microphones in front of you guys. You can turn the microphones on. Do you need a? Ann doesn't want the microphone. Okay. If we can start on the right there.
Is this the right? Okay. Great presentations. Thank you both. Illinois' structural deficit is real. And right now, Illinois is unusual in that it fully exempts IRA distributions, 401k distributions, pensions, and Social Security benefits. My husband and I are just starting to navigate this space as we're getting very close to retiring. And I literally cannot believe that a lot of our income in Illinois is going to be tax-free, and that this has been going on all these years. And we've had people complaining, you know, that we're such a high tax state and all that. There needs to be a means test on this. We're leaving serious money on the table. Not only that, I am today's years old when I learned that families our age can pour a lot of money into their 401ks in these years after a certain age. You can put in almost $30,000 of maybe even more into your IRA. It's not taxed going in by Illinois, and you could turn around and take it out the next day and it won't be taxed either. This is crazy. It's crazy tax policy. I want to hear what you have to say about all of that.
Yeah, well, we've tried. And the reason I look like this is because we tried. So means testing, adding retirement income into our income tax base makes all the sense in the world. And a number of years ago, we'd put together a proposal that said at 100,000 a year, 25% of your retirement income would be taxable. At 150, 50%, at 175, 75%, at 200,000 or more, all of it, right? So scale in. Nobody with less than 100,000 would pay a nickel. That impacted like less than 7% of the seniors, 6%. It was a tiny number. ARP killed it. ARP refused to allow any taxation on any retirement income. And in meetings behind the scenes, we were like, well, this additional revenue could be used to subsidize the kind of programs that low-income seniors rely on without taxing them any. It's actually a good thing to do from a progressive and equity standpoint. So the politics of that are tough, because what you're going to have are a lot of people screaming and yelling, you know, you're going after seniors and da-da-da-da. And if you recall the anti-fair tax campaign that was run by the right wing when that proposal was pending, they said this is an attempt to get at your retirement income. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form. That it's such a political hot button issue. So it is the right thing to do from a tax policy standpoint. Yes. Will we be putting out a paper that explains that in the near future? Yes. It's called Funding Our Future. It just runs through what tax policy should look like, and then, you know, sort of Illinois is the before case and what we should look like after. But it's a very tough road to hoe. The other proposals that were on the table, a number of the ones that are currently pending that Nadeen talked about and that I mentioned really quickly, including the wealth tax and some of these other things. These are things we could do now. They wouldn't solve all our structural problems, but they would help. The structural solves that we could do now, I think politically, are increase the income tax rate and create a refundable credit and expand the base. Those are things that are doable and have some support across the aisle, and they make structural changes. I agree with you from a policy standpoint. I just think politically it's very hard.
I think if you offered some property tax, better rebates for seniors, maybe the ARP thing would be mitigated a little bit.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to move to the left for a question. I just want to make sure that these microphones are on and you're speaking directly and closely to the microphone.
I am absolutely on top of the microphone. This is a narrower question about tax policy. One of the things that seems to be missing from all discussions is increased taxation of alcohol and dope. And I want to know, I mean, I'm less concerned about dope actually than I am about alcohol, since taxing alcohol would reduce crime in addition to its many other benefits. But is there some structural obstacle, named Wirtz or something to increasing taxation on alcohol?
There's no structural obstacle to it, but those are excise taxes, so they're per unit taxes, right? Excise taxes don't grow with the economy over time. So they give you a little nominal jump on a year-to-year basis, but on an inflation-adjusted basis, let me just make this more real. If it's, let's say, $1 per liter of booze that you added on to your thing, it's $1 per liter this year, next year, next year, next year, next year. By the 5th year, in real terms, it's worth 65 cents per liter, right? It becomes something that contributes to the structural deficit over time. It's an okay thing to do to accomplish other policy reasons, reduce crime, those kinds of things. It generates some short-term revenue blip, but it's not a structural problem. So.
Thank you.
Sorry, one quick thing on that. Also, it's in terms of race equity, it disproportionately impacts Black and brown populations. So it is not sound tax policy or progressive tax policy.
Go ahead on the right.
Right.
Yes, thank you both. They both touched on a topic that's very, very dear and difficult in my life, which is healthcare access. And regarding Mr. Martire's presentation about the budget, I really appreciate how well you explained your different proposed structural reforms. And I'm wondering if anyone, this is a two-part question, has anyone studying the state budget looked at what would happen if to our budget if we had a national single payer system? How would that national single payers healthcare system affect the budget deficit, including pension costs?
So that answer can't be given because I don't know what the system looks like. So obviously the design of the system then dictates its impact on our policy. But I want to emphasize, I thought that your focus, Nadeen, on the Medicaid part of it is really meaningful. I have a lot of data on that. So the numbers, are you going numb yet? Somewhere between 280,000 and 500,000 Illinoisans are going to lose health care coverage with these Medicaid cuts. Just to give you context, it's brutal, and it will not just harm those families. I mean, and lead to unnecessary deaths. Yale and Harvard University did studies on this that found anywhere between 8,000 and 50,000 more people will die annually because of lack of access to Medicaid, preventable deaths. I can't break that down by the state level. Those are national numbers, but still pretty scary. And it hurts our economy. So for every dollar invested in healthcare, you get about $1.50 of private sector economic activity. And the flip is also true. So for every dollar cut in Medicaid expenditures, you lose about $1.50 in economic activity. You know where this is going to be devastating? Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is going to lose hospitals. They're going to lose jobs, and they're going to have major economic harm in addition to the personal health care harm, which I thought it was really great of you to emphasize. That was great. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what a national program would mean because I'd have to know its design.
Right, I understand that, but I'm wondering, is it possible for our state to actually create a study? There are proposals out there, and this is a huge portion of the budget and of household budgets as well, and lives would be not only saved but changed, and we wouldn't have to deal. I loved what Nadeen said with this is all possible. And I think it's important that we look at the possibilities and not the political obstacles. Thank you.
Really quickly on that, it wasn't a study that measured it based on impact on the budget, but the state did do a study about a couple of years ago. It was our Medicaid agency that actually did it with our Department of Insurance. And it looked at if we were to move some levers when it comes to health policy, including what they call the Medicaid buy-in option, what that would do in terms of reducing health insurance, reducing healthcare disparities, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to share that because that might just give you a flavor of like more potential possibilities. It didn't look at impact on debt, like the state debt or national debt, but it had some numbers in there. The other thing that I would point us to is we have kind of an experiment, right? So we had before the Affordable Care Act in terms of numbers, uninsured numbers, how much uncompensated care hospitals and others paid, and how that impacted private health insurance costs in terms of, because people who have private health insurance pay more when we have more uncompensated care and more uninsured people. So we should expect private health insurance to also be impacted in a negative way because Medicaid is getting cut and because Medicare is getting cut. So I'm happy to share that to be circulated. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. I'm sure the question will be short. I'm sure the answer will not be. And we clearly need to schedule more time for revenue and budget discussion. So one more question, and then we're going to go on break. And I'm hoping that the panelists are going to be here still for the break. And if you have any further questions, you can ask them then. Go ahead.
Given the over-reliance on property taxes for education and other services, if we were to somehow pivot toward restorative justice and spend less money on prisons, could that help alleviate the problem?
A little bit, but the public safety budget, at least at the state level, is one of the smallest parts of the budget. It's every year it varies somewhere between 5.8 and 7.2% of our general fund spending on services. So, you could cut some of that. I don't know how much of that you could really save because they've been cutting that line over time as it is. Now at the local level, it's more of an issue, and that would be a municipality to municipality analysis, and that's a very different analysis. City of Chicago, which I was appointed to that task force that's supposedly solving the city's fiscal problems. That's why I drink stuff that doesn't look like water on a regular basis. Chicago's actually short-staffed in their police department by some 600 uniformed officers and over 300 detectives, which creates its own unique problem. So it's a complex issue, and it's one that deserves really good study and a thoughtful analysis. Be very different from locality to locality than it would be at the state level. I don't see significant savings at the state level, but I can imagine you could get some.
Okay, I was thinking mainly of the prisons themselves, but yeah, it is complicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Clearly, these are complicated questions with complicated answers. We thank the panel for their participation.